Hi, everyone. This is Brendan Gilhuly from Atiim. Thank you very much. We have many of the attendees are in, and I think we're ready to get started. Once again, thank you very much for joining our webinar. We are presenting a discussion back and forth on implementing and scaling OKRs in 2019. I am Brendan Gilhuly. I am Vice President of Sales and Customer Success for Atiim. Been with the organization, leading those two areas for the past 2.5 years. Just a bit about Atiim. If you don't know, we're a simple yet powerful OKR software. Many high-performing companies use Atiim to set and track OKRs, align and focus everyone on what matters most and drive amazing results. Very simply, we build software to simplify OKR execution at scale. I am very, very excited to welcome Alex Bartholomaus. He's president and CEO of People Stretch Solutions. Alex and I have been working together for, I guess, over a year since we were first introduced and had started our conversations about OKRs and perhaps using them within his clients. So, Alex, welcome. And if you don't mind, please just tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, thank you. So I'm my firm, People Stretch Solutions. We're a sales growth consulting and C-level advisory firm. We're based in the Washington, D.C. area. We work with mid-market companies across North and South America as well as Europe. And what we do is primarily focus on four parts of the company. We'll help advise on strategy. We'll work to coach leaders. We'll also help support sales effectiveness with the sales organization, and we'll also consult on process and tools that drive performance. So we met thanks to us getting involved on strategy and tooling, and that's when we started talking over a year ago, and now we've been very happy using the Atiim tool on a couple of our clients. And I'm excited today just to talk about implementing and scaling OKR. So thank you for having me today, Brendan.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I thought maybe we could start off with a poll. So I'm going to launch this now just to get a level set on where everybody is in terms of their maturity level with OKRs. So that quick poll is now out there. So please feel free to select one of the following answers. But we're just curious: what is your company's experience level with OKRs? Do you have lots of experience? You're using OKRs effectively and using them for multiple quarters? Some experience where you're still learning how to use OKRs effectively, but have taken the leap and starting to iterate and use them over a period of time and maybe one or two areas, or don't have much experience at all, and you're just starting or you're about to start and you're no experience and you're just in the exploratory phase, and or maybe you've never heard of them. But we are just curious to, let's help get this an idea of the level that we should be discussing and how we can make this a productive time for everybody. And, this is a webinar, but we would really appreciate your participation as well. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to go back and forth between Alex and myself, and we would love to have this as interactive as possible. And of course, we'll make ourselves available and our organizations available afterwards. Should there be additional interest and follow up that we can do. So terrific. So just while we're going through that. There's just been a lot of buzz around OKRs. John Doerr launched his book, Measure What Matters, and it really became a touch point since the summer that I've had hundreds of conversations of people and different organizations at different levels of organizations that have been introduced to the book, and the idea of alignment really appealed to different people in the organization, and they wanted to learn more. They wanted to practice it. They wanted to see if they could scale it at their organizations. But just, a bit about, John Doerr himself. He actually began his career at Intel and learned what was IMBOs from Andy Grove, and so it has a long track record. And John actually brought OKRs to Google, to Amazon, to Twitter, and several other companies, and really was credited in that introduction and helping those organizations scale to a much greater extent. And just in terms of a definition, Atiim defines OKRs. It's a management approach used to align everyone at your company, focus everyone's efforts on what really matters, and make all progress measurable so you can achieve your top corporate objectives and accelerate your business performance and results. Some of the key takeaways that came from John Doerr's book, and of course, this is much of what we want to talk about today. So we wanted to just lay this foundation, and again, kind of ask your familiarity of it. But when John Doerr talked about OKR, he really, talked about, focusing effort on the same important issues throughout the organization, having a collaborative goal-setting protocol for companies, teams, and individuals. Basically said, ideas are easy. It's execution that's everything, and OKRs can help you with your execution. And how do they do that? They do that primarily through the four superpowers, as John calls them in the book: focus and commit to priorities, align and connect for teamwork, track for accountability, and stretch for amazing. So we're going to today, talk about how these superpowers can help an organization implement and scale OKRs. We're going to use real life examples that, again, that's why I'm so excited to have Alex here, because he has certainly been at the front lines and been someone who has taken CEOs through the journeys and senior leadership teams through the journeys of articulating their strategy, but the important part is connecting it to execution. So with this, I thought maybe I'm seeing some of the results here and collecting those responses. I see we are 5% at lots of experience, 17% at some experience, 36% little experience, just getting started, and 38% no experience in the learning exploratory phase. So that's great to know. And again, we have many at Atiim, and I can point you to our website a little bit later. But at Atiim, we have many resources. I often get compliments on what different resources we have at many different levels of OKR maturity. So would be happy to set you guys up with anything that can help you move forward. And I'm going to close this poll here. And I think what we wanted to do is also, as you're doing this exploratory or just getting started, which is the majority of our attendees today, we also wanted to ask the question, is getting started, is getting better at setting and executing against strategic goals a top 3 priority for your CEO? So that poll's in progress, and I can see that we're in the high 80s right now at yes. So That's obviously what's driving a lot of the interest here, which is great to hear. So
So,
yeah, go ahead,
so
Alex.
Brendan, in light of the maturity being half our crowd has little to no experience, we should throw out something just to make it very understandable for everyone. And I think I'm guessing most people on the call have been exposed to some variation of MBOs. And I think just as a point of reference, OKRs have a lot of similarities. They do have some key differences. And so the key difference that I just want to highlight before we start talking about the notion of scaling is this aspect of a lot of times people they have goals that are possibly difficult to measure,
Hmm.
and they get really wrapped around the axle. Is, do we set it for the year, 6 months? And what OKRs and the simplicity that I love is that it lays out a system for people to think the objective is the longitudinal goal, and every quarter you're setting very specific, measurable key results. And so the act of going through that process is incredibly valuable for an organization and its strategic leadership team. And if the broader leadership team can participate, it's a wonderful experience in and of itself, but it starts to unlock this upside potential and really great performances. So I just wanted to throw that out there. As people don't have that much experience, what are OKRs? OKRs are not that different than MBOs. I think that there are some very specific differences that I'll highlight as we go through this presentation, as will Brendan.
Yeah, excellent point. Peter Drucker introduced the concept of management by objective, and initially, I mentioned that John Doerr was mentored by Andy Grove in his book High Output Management. He, Intel, when Intel originally, took MBOs and created what became OKRs, they called them IMBOs. So it's a direct connection, this direct lineage, and just at a high level, it's just about adding, that level of measurability through the key results that differentiate them and really help unlock those superpowers. Um, so, as we kind of, in terms of like sticking with the first superpower, focus and commit to priorities. What interested me, Alex, and I thought would be incredibly interesting to our webinar guests, would be many times when I enter into the point in the conversation with prospects and people who have raised their hands for demos or just asked for different bits of information. The conversation and discovery that we're having, I often hear. Yeah, we're just about to go do our management offsite, or we've come from our management offsite and we've set our strategy, and now we want to try and uh, scale this throughout the organization to have everybody connect more clearly to those top priorities. And I just thought it was fascinating that that's primarily where you and I started our conversation. So I was hoping you could share some of your insights, some of your experience on what does that process look like, and how are you bringing that senior leadership team along to help them with those pain points of alignment and clarity and driving that execution.
Yep, that's it. So there are many questions there. So let me see if I can start answering a few. If we can go to the next slide. I think where we start is a lot of times we have teams that have a strategy, and then they might lay out these strategic priorities, But then how do I make it work? Now, Brendan, I'm not sure if I'm having technical difficulty, but I'm still seeing the quick poll slide. Just
Oh, gotcha. Let me close that poll. Thank you. By the way, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Where we are with the poll in progress is 80% were yes, 5% were no, 16% were I do not know. So thanks
okay,
for
great,
letting me know.
awesome.
And did you want to be on this one, Alex?
Yeah, this is great. So where one of the things as we began this journey of working with OKRs is a leader would think, okay, how do I get my leadership team connected to these OKRs? And the first question that we learn to ask is, okay, do you have KPIs for each department? If you're an organization that has KPIs, great. You're used to trying to measure some form of efficiency, capacity, output, and so that's a good first step. If you've struggled to set KPIs in your organization, that's okay. That's just the act of trying to measure what matters. And really measure what's important in that department will take some practice. So the first thing I'll say is you have to be patient as you work through this. If we can go to the next slide, I'm seeing, so a lot of times, and if everyone can see this visual, leaders think of hierarchical organizations. And a lot of times, just visually, they'll look at priorities, and the priorities will be above the organization, or they might view them as two equal things. And what we find is that the structure, we tried to mix up a CEO, and if you spend some time on the Atiim website, you'll see the flexibility of connecting, the CEO to the strategic priority, and then you can connect people to a strategic priority. And there's a lot of flexibility in order to accommodate probably smaller and growing organizations. With the organizations that we've worked with, they had matured and they needed structure. So an important aspect, if you can go to the next slide, is we started getting the CEO to think about, hey, how are you aligning the team to that? And if you can just go one more forward. And then we said, okay, let's start thinking, okay, let's align it. And all of a sudden, visually, we created something that maybe some of you already on the call figured out. It took us actually one round of doing it, and we just set it up visually. And we just got them to think, okay, how can you look at them visually and start connecting the teams? And there's an important hierarchy here that we learned, that in order for certainly to get the most from a data analysis perspective, as you get more mature and you want to track this information from a data hierarchy, you want to think CEO, team, individuals, okay? And maybe some of you already knew that Atiim allows you to track it from the CEO to individuals, from the CEO to teams. And that flexibility, like I said, is good for smaller companies, but for mid-sized companies, it can get you in a little bit of trouble from a consistency standpoint. The next important thing we learned, if you can just go to the next slide, is we just started, and we would actually print this out and have the CEO do this by hand. And just by getting the CEO doing it by the hand and then doing it in a group exercise with the leadership team, that experiential activity really helped everyone see what the priorities were and really said, you know what, that's right, I should be connected. And frankly, And this took actually 2 rounds before the 3rd round that we actually got to doing we got the idea of doing the physical handwritten exercise. The CEO was actually surprised at the level of commitment and how it grew from the leaders and what they wanted to be connected with. And from the CEO's perspective, the engagement from each quarterly offsite grew as now leaders had the opportunity to help develop the strategic priorities and have a say and have feedback as to which that they would be participating in. And that was very, very powerful. So I covered a lot of nuances, and if I had to kind of simplify, I think it's really, if you're in a mid-size or a large organization, setting the structure and then just this simple visual of rotating it and taking a team just through that experiential of, okay, did the team participate in creating this strategic priorities? Great. And now that they created them, help allow the team to actually have a voice in which of the strategic priorities that they'll participate in. And those, 3 things that I just mentioned, of just starting with the right structure, having the team participate in developing the strategic priorities, and then having the team participate in connecting them to the priorities, those are the 3 biggest things we've learned in the last year of really getting companies engaged in the OKR methodology and really being able to get more value out of them. And certainly now that we have one client in particular that is they're almost at a year mark, and they've done 3 rounds of planning, and we've learned that it's very much an iterative process, and you just have to be patient, and you have to just invest the time as a team to stay focused on making sure that you've got the right priorities, you're trying to measure them, you're connecting the right people to the right priorities, and then you're sticking with it. So I'm going to pause there. And Brendan, maybe we can see if anyone from the audience has questions, just because we covered some pretty important steps and let me be very clear, we certainly made some mistakes along the way that helped us arrive at some of these best practices. So I'd be happy to field some questions. And Brendan, should they just put that through the chat function to you? What's the best way for people to ask questions?
Well, there is a question area, in the webinar panel, and so I have been going back and forth with 1 or 2 people. People were kind to let us know that the poll was still up and the slides were not. So I have seen that some people have been able to write in those questions. So please, we encourage you to write in and ask some questions, and we can answer them here in real time. So I will, just give it a pause here for just a second and see what comes through. Okay, so I do see a few here from Thomas. Can OKRs work with, hang on a second, I'm going to have to expand this. Okay, can OKRs work with BSC? Not familiar with the BSC. Alex, I put you on the spot there for a second. Thomas, could you expand on BSC just for a moment? Or Alex, do you familiar with that yourself?
I know the business model canvas, but BFC I'm not familiar with. So if Thomas can just clarify, maybe we can go to the next question, and after Thomas clarifies, we can come back to him.
Perfect. Yeah. How do KPIs relate to OKRs?
That's a great question. Brendan, I know that you have a strong point of view here. So would you like to go first, or would you like me to answer that?
Sure. No, absolutely. So, in every KR, there is a KPI, a key performance indicator, So again, they're um, uh, another measurement tool that you can have in your toolbox to understand where you are. One of the differences between KPIs and OKRs is KPIs are largely rear facing. It's where we have been, and kind of brings you up to that point in time. OKRs are more forward facing, and we want to set those key results into the future, so that we have something to drive towards. Um, so those are just some of the main differences that I generally discuss. But again, key results, KPIs. In every key result, there actually is a KPI. Um, what say you, Alex, on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to agree and add, if let's say we take sales and sales, a lot of people look at revenue, but if I'm a big fan of looking at sales activity, and so a OKR, and the objective is to acquire a certain number of net new accounts, so the key result is probably could be activity driven. There's a couple of ways to measure that. There's a leading way, but sometimes I think that depending on the nature of the account acquisition, you might have account acquisition might be the year-long improve as an organization in account acquisition, and the key result for first quarter is 20. So a lot of times juxtapose that with KPI. I've seen organizations say customer acquisition is the KPI, or I would have heard organizations say that the 20 for Q1 is the KPI, and how's it break it down monthly? And so I think without splitting hairs, there's a certain amount of interchangeability, because in the end, what the process of OKRs is asking you to do is to give some thought about, you're going to give someone a number, and does that number get them focused on the right activity? Does that get them going down the right path? In some cases, it doesn't. So we certainly, in working with our clients, have tried to advise them as well as we could what worked and what didn't. And in some cases, especially operational roles, it took some trial and error of finding, we had used some KPIs, but we found that certain KPIs that they'd used in the past only covered a portion of what they did, and actually wasn't that connected to the strategic priority of the organization. So KPIs, the active KPI, very helpful, and in some cases, depending on your definition of KPIs, they can be very similar. So Brendan, back to you. Did Thomas clarify the acronym?
He did, yes. I guess I'm slightly embarrassed. When it had BSC, I started thinking Boston Sports Club, our gym downstairs. So it is actually Balanced Scorecard, and I'm going to pass that over to you as someone who's working with CEOs on a regular basis on those priorities.
So I see them as very connected. One of the things with Balanced Scorecard, there's different thoughts about the time dimension of a Balanced Scorecard. My experience, it's more on an annualized basis. So I see it very aligned in terms of OKR saying, okay, as an organization, we are going to try to get very focused. Now, one of the key things I've seen Balanced Scorecards break down because there's too much criteria. One of the key things that Door talks about in the book, and certainly Atiim talks about, and we talk about it, you have to be very careful in setting the right number of strategic priorities. And so I think collectively 3 to 5 is a good range to start off with. it's unfortunately falls prey to the Goldilocks syndrome, where you have to get it right. 3 might be too many, believe it or not. For some organizations, certainly a startup, they might only want to have 2. In a complex business, you might have to have more, 4 or 5. So it varies on context. And so from that perspective, I definitely think you have to be mindful of the number of strategic priorities. And so that's how I view it relative to a managed scorecard. Any other questions, Brendan, before we continue?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a bunch of questions coming in, and I want to assure everybody that we will, if we don't get to these in our Q&A here, we will respond to everybody with an answer and some resources, from Atiim as well. So here's, a fairly straightforward one here from Charles Dayton. Are these strategic priorities the same as objectives? Yes, those would be more company level strategic priorities. And with OKRs, we are able to break those down from level to level so that you're identifying what is that unit of work, what's the accountability from a department, from a team, from an individual, and ultimately kind of bottom up. How do those individuals or teams, how do they align to those strategic priorities? How does their work drive the needle and make progress throughout the alignment within the organization? So that is those strategic priorities are primarily the top company objectives. When we talk about OKRs, they're generally within an annual time frame, and those priorities with like a balanced scorecard or different strategic planning that an organization might do with someone like Alex could be several years. But the beauty of OKRs is to break those down to more achievable time frames so that you can sprint over the course of a quarter, let's say, to to make those achievable. That's that stretch for amazing superpower that we started with. So, well, that's actually decent. A decent segue there. But before we go on to that, there were a few more questions. Should we dive into a few more, Alex, and then?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if we can answer a few of them, just because I think we don't have that many more slides, and we certainly have 25 minutes, and I'd love to be able to answer as many of the questions as quickly as possible.
Great. So this one's directly to you, coming from Merlin Lockey. What was the most challenging issue that Alex has had to deal with in the introduction with OKRs?
The most challenging issue has been getting the entire leadership team on board to measure on a quarterly basis progress. And in some cases, you have people, there's a little bit of rigor that some people struggle with. In some cases, there's just the active measuring, and with some of these goals we talked about, sometimes operationally or in different parts of the company, it can be challenging in terms of how to measure. So just getting everybody into the modality of saying, okay, if these are the priorities, then I'm going to be connected to this, and this is how we're going to measure my success in doing my part of that. Okay, that sounds logical, but not everybody first embraces this. There's, certainly there's some change management from the standpoint, and is this a tactic for people to get rid of me? Is this a tactic to keep me from, growing? And there's always some level of skepticism when you start adopting a new methodology in order to govern. And so as a team, you have to focus on the positive. You have to be very transparent, and transparency is a key tenet in OKRs. And so if you're transparent that we're doing this as a team and we're doing it to grow as a team, I think growth requires some level of rigor in order to increase the chance that you'll be able to scale. It's not for everybody, but if a team believes that rigor is important and needs a system, well, OKRs could be a very good system for you.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to follow up on that just a minute. Actually, so one of the questions coming in here from Sunday Eucabitis, shout out Sunday, and we've spoken before. So can you use, or have you seen companies use OKRs for maintaining service levels, such as we want to maintain 99% uptime for our website in Q1? Yes, we have. I'll try to answer that fairly briefly. So, we have at Atiim, we kind of preach a real world, application of OKRs, and I think many times, people do a lot of reading, and Google's done an amazing amount of work in spreading the gospel. One of those is actually, we're talking about stretch here, and stretching for amazing. But many times they talked about moonshots and having very aggressive goals. But we also at Atiim, we talk about more operational goals. There's also the concept that you need to keep the trains running, and you need to track your efficiency so that you can are handling the things that you have to do so that you can accomplish the things that you want to do. So yes, absolutely, Sunday. We have definitely seen companies use OKRs. And quick plug, we have in our platform an ability to measure to a floor or a ceiling, similar to a KPI, that on a week-to-week basis, hey, we're staying above the floor, or we're staying below the ceiling. And if we set a floor and a ceiling, we call it a range. And so it's one of the things in our data model that makes us a very metric-driven platform, in that we're able to take those operational key results and help you track them in a very sophisticated way. So let's see. Here's I see Tom from Charles Hall. I think the struggle is getting execs to do the work. They have to do their part first, or nobody else's matters. And it's quite a little work. So Alex, I think quite a lot of work, I'm going to assume he meant. Again, that was Charles Hall. Alex, I think you're on the front lines there. I'm just going to punt that right over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if an organization is doing business planning, OKRs do not create any more work than people are already putting forth from a business planning perspective. The first change management aspect is what OKRs tend to do, it brings more people into business planning. So if you feel you're overworked, there's good news. This might actually help share some of that work with some of your peers. And from my perspective, organizations hopefully should be either on-premise or going off-premise, doing some sort of strategic quarterly exercise, whether it's an off-site or on-premise, really looking at working on the business and thinking strategically. And so if you're not doing that, yes, it is more work. But frankly, I think people work hard, and when they get a chance to work on the business, it actually gets to show them what they've accomplished, and frankly helps stoke the fire of passion and enthusiasm for the company and the cause and the mission. And then it's worthwhile effort. But is it a lot of work for executives? no, from my perspective, I'm assuming that the executives on the call are already working a lot. This is a way to spread the wealth to get others to working as much as you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. From what I personally have seen in terms of successful rollouts. What two authors who wrote a great book on OKRs, Paul Niven and Ben Lamort. They identified that the number one predictor to success is having a strong executive sponsor. It doesn't necessarily need to be the CEO, but someone at the executive level that is really going to own the process. And finally, John Doerr, in his book, getting back to that, he's having the commitment is absolutely critical for the CEO. He says it requires a public commitment by leadership in word and deed. The system works provided the leadership of the company embraces it. If the CEO of the company doesn't believe in OKRs and won't pursue them, I suggest you not try. And that's been borne out as well. So really need to have those OKRs. The CEOs, bought in and see the benefit, and then also, conversely, from the bottom up, we need to be able to communicate what our OKR is going to deliver to the organization. How is it going to positively affect the culture? How is it going to keep us on track and help us drive towards the objectives that we want to hit as an organization? And maybe here, why don't we go through next few slides? And I do want to get to the last two superpowers of track and stretch. What John Doerr calls CFRs, conversations, feedback, and recognition. And we can go through those and then return back to some of those questions, because it really does get to what we had just the topic of what we had just been speaking. And it's a disconnect. 95% of employees do not fully understand the company's strategy or goals of what's expected of them to achieve the company goals. And I know, Alex, when we started talking about alignment, and we turned the org chart on its side and created that cross alignment from department to department to the different strategic priorities of the organization. I was wondering, if I could just ask you a question in terms of, well, how was that a bottom up effort? How did you see that work well, coming from the bottom up, where the departments would suggest what they would deliver, and then teams perhaps would suggest up to the teams and to the departments, and individuals up to the teams, so that it becomes more of a bottom up approach. How have you seen that work with the companies that you've worked with?
Sure, and maybe you can go to the next slide as I kind of give this explanation. I think especially when we started empowering leaders to decide which strategic priorities they wanted to be connected with, part of what drove their decision to connect to certain strategic priorities, I believe, was the conversations that they were having to their teams. And so a very important aspect of OKRs is this hopefully ongoing team and downward dialogue. And I think this is a challenge many organizations are having, is connecting the people down to the first line with the strategic priorities, and trying to ensure that you're having the right conversations down. If goals are just being pushed down, it tends to be filtered because there wasn't a certain amount of authorship by that department head. The moment you start empowering the department head in terms of shaping the strategic priority and deciding what they're going to participate in, they've actually taken ownership. which is very important. And then they've turned around and they've shared this with their team. And they, to some degree, feel like they're also an advocate for their team. So it's this very unique, bi-directional conversation that's happening. And so when you empower and have the right interaction, with that leader, it goes downward. And I think we didn't necessarily look to particularly try to nurture that as much in the beginning. We made a mistake of presuming that it was happening. And what we learned as we looked to get greater adoption, we started asking the question, what was that conversation sounding like? And how do we improve it? And through that very iterative process of asking leaders how to get more buy-in from their teams, this whole notion of being able to have a larger say and that leader feeling like they were a proxy for their team about the direction their company should go in. And so to me, that was something that is very much around the conversations, getting feedback, and in some cases, there being recognition for the ideas and the general direction that people who normally don't have a seat at the table wanted to feel like they wanted to have a little input.
That's a great answer. And I see from Diana Kaiser. Hi, Diana. How are you? She is one of our customers. She says we have jumped in 100% to Atiim and OKRs and are rolling it out to everyone in our 200-person organization. We have the senior management buy-in, and we'll be able to get most people to put in their OKRs in Q1 for 2019. Her question is, do you have any other suggestion as to how we can get everyone in the company engaged in doing weekly check-ins? That seems to me to be the key to adoption. So building on your comments of engaging more people in the organization, Alex, having them feel like they have a greater voice and a greater seat at the table. You really pointed out that inflection point of the manager. At Atiim, we really see it's a team. We're really trying to stress the importance of the team. To be a resource, and OKRs are certainly a resource for managers to be more tightly aligned with their teams. And conversely, going back to the original point here, have more people in the organization fully understand the strategy and goals and what's expected of them. So by creating that that transparency through key results, assigning the accountability, in a metric-driven way. Now it's up to really the manager to create that culture, to create that buy-in, to help the employee understand, what's expected of them, and also how their work drives the overall progress of their team, of their department, of their organization. And one of the key ways to do that is to really, lead those one-on-ones. Of course, in Atiim we have a consolidated, automated way to have those one-on-ones, and they can be virtual or in person. But again, the same way the CEO needs to have that buy-in, and we recommend this at every level of the organization. But when you're getting down to that engagement piece of it, and making sure that everybody in the organization is really bought in and understands the benefit and the value and how this really will propel the organization, start your meetings with goals. Ask the questions: how is your progress on your top goals? Do you think you're on track overall? What are your small wins? There's a book out of Harvard called The Progress Principle by Therese Amiable, and it states that employees find greater enjoyment and satisfaction and meaning and depth in their work when there's celebrating the small wins. So with those one-on-ones, when managers are, providing that recognition and that acknowledgement, they're getting more bought in, and they're understanding how they're connecting to the bigger picture. And conversely, you're able to, if there are problem areas, you're identifying those earlier. You're, being an advocate for your team. Hey, where are you stuck? What are the bottlenecks? How can I help? It's helping the managers, practice that servant leadership that will help the organization achieve in a more meaningful way. So, in terms of that CFR.
So Brendan, can I jump in real quick just to respond directly to Diane's question?
Yeah.
So Diane, one of the things that's wonderful that you guys are excited and you're going to roll this out for Q1. In any change management initiative, we always look at organizationally, it's those mid-level managers that are going to make or break this. And so the increasing the chance of the weekly check-in, I think if weekly one-on-ones is the standard for your organization, then you should do weekly check-ins. We've actually seen in some organizations, it may actually make sense to do bi-weekly because that's the organizational rhythm. They don't meet weekly, they actually meet every other week. So a key aspect is when align the check-in for what the organizational rhythm is. Because we do a lot around behavioral analysis, and we really focus on an organization's behavior and coming up with systems and process that make sense and support it. And so that's one tactical thing. The other is how can you create cohorts among the managers to share how they're doing. So creating cohorts, especially for the first 6 weeks of rollout, just to keep the enthusiasm up. And then the final thing, and this is very Atiim specific, you might want to pare down what people are reporting on because Atiim has a lot of functionality, like many other software programs. If you take advantage of all of it out of the gate, that might overwhelm some people. And if you, for the check-in, if you can distill it to really the critical things, and you can always add the following quarter, you're going to create, you increase the chance of your first quarter rollout success.
Fantastic. So I see we just, we're at 5 minutes remaining. I want to turn this over to you, Alex, for this final slide, and then we can wrap.
So I kind of spoke to this a little bit in the advice that I just got. Number one, when you're rolling it out, there's extra time rationalizing the objectives and the key results, and making sure that the next level, so from the top strategic priority, where an organization can struggle is the first link. So spend extra time making sure that it makes sense. I just talked about the sustainable check-ins, either weekly or bi-weekly, and that has everything to do with what is the organizational rhythm. Ensure management is using OKRs to push accountability downward in the organization. To me, this is about management being engaged with the tool. How do you make sure that they're using the tool and accountability follows? And then at the end of the quarter, review, plan, and repeat the cycle. And this is, I think, where a lot of organizations are like, oh man, we have to do this again. And it's not a question, oh, we have to do this again. It's like, this is great. We have 3 months under our belt. How will we do this better? And so make sure the people who are excited just to look at the progress, who are excited to tinker and want to do it better. There's some important team dynamics at people who weren't bought in that should be talked to. I think people need to look at with something like this. This requires a full commitment, not a conditional commitment, a full commitment. And what I mean by that is a conditional commitment is someone says, I'm committed as long as it's not too hard and not too scary. And the reality is that an organization needs commitment that people are going to do everything they can within reason in order to make this successful. And like I said, I'm a little biased. I'm a fan of the practice, but we're seeing more of our highly driven, high functioning clients latch on to this because it's a good system, it's quarterly, and it just drives that transparency around performance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an iterative process and one that allows for at the end of the quarter to take a few weeks to have a retrospective and reset for the next quarter and take those learnings and move them forward. So I see we're right here at about 2 minutes left. So I do want to thank everybody for joining. I want to assure everybody that we will reach out. I'm almost 100% sure that GoToWebinar will capture these questions, and we will be reaching out personally to provide either resources or answer your question directly. And of course, we would love to talk to you if you would like a live demonstration of the platform, and also importantly, talk about what Atiim does in terms of customer success to help roll out those strategic priorities. And of course, would certainly like to thank Alex. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can set those strategic priorities and work with the senior leadership team, here is Alex's information here, alex@peoplestretch.com, and feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to connect you all together. Yeah, we really appreciate your time. We're at our time right now, so I'm going to sign off. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully helping you in 2019 roll out and scale your OKRs. Thanks so much.